Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to the latest installment in the Black Hat webinar series. I watched you roll the die. Unparalleled RDP Monitoring Reveal Attackers Tradecraft, sponsored by Syxsense and brought to you by Black Hat and Informa. I'm Steve Paul with Black Hat. I'm your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters, and later on in the program, we'll ask for your feedback. We strongly encourage participation and are happy to take your questions and comments. You can participate in our Q&A by simply asking questions at any time. Just type them into the Ask a Question text box in the bottom of our console. We'll answer as many questions as time permits after our presentations. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event, and PDF copies of the presentations can be found in the resources box on your console. At this time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. If you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webinar help guide by clicking on the help question mark icon. If slides are not advancing, please press the F5 key on your keyboard to refresh your browser. And now on to our presentation. I watched you roll the die. Unparalleled RDP Monitoring Reveal Attackers Tradecraft. Discussing today's presentation will be Olivier Bilodeau, Cybersecurity Research Director, and Andréanne Bergeron, Cybersecurity Researcher, both with GoSecure. Then we'll hear from our sponsor presenter, John Cassell, Senior Solutions Architect with Syxsense. Now, first, over to you, Olivier.
Thank you. All right, as was mentioned a couple of times already, we're going to talk about RDP monitoring, so attackers, people attacking RDP. For the presentation, we will use Dungeons and Dragons analogy as a vehicle to the presentation. And so why did we think we could pull off a D&D themed presentation for a cybersecurity event? Well, because last summer, now maybe almost 2 years ago, Stranger Things Season 4 brought Dungeons and Dragons in the forefront, featuring it in its latest season. But also, almost last year to this day, there was the Dungeons and Dragons, the first good Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves, to go out. And when we were studying the adversaries, we saw clear parallels between Dungeons and Dragons classes and the attackers that we witnessed. So we were well introduced, but going quickly over my expertise and interests, I've been doing malware research for the last 10 years, 12 years. And I am the Cybersecurity Research Director at GoSecure. I'm also president at NorthSec, where we have training session, a conference, and a CTF in Montreal. And I founded Applied Security Workshops doing CTF exercises called Montreal. Andréanne, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Andréanne Bergeron. I am a cybersecurity researcher working with Olivier at GoSecure. I'm also an adjunct professor at Université de Montréal in Canada. I'm also involved in NorthSec and in the Canadian Cybersecurity Network.
So today's quest, if we may, has to do with RDP interception. We will go over 5 different attacker classes. This summarizes over 190 million events analyzed inside our honeypots, and we will highlight some memorable sessions. This is a shortened version of our Black Hat USA 2023 presentation and DEF CON presentation, both of which could be found online. We have cut some of the content for time constraints. So if you feel like you needed more information, feel free to refer to these resources. Now, here are the character classes that we're going to look into today. There are 5 of them, some well hidden, so we'll get back to them later. Now, why are we studying RDP? Well, the reason is that RDP is highly targeted. It is, in fact, the second most important infection vector for ransomware outbreaks only second to phishing attempts or phishing emails. So it is really ripe for study. What we realize is, as I've been running honeypots for years online, and Telnet and SSH are attacked by non-humans. They are attacked by bots. But when we looked at RDP, we quickly realized that beyond the usual brute forcing, so like finding the credentials to get in is done via scripts. But once they are in the system, in 99% of the cases, we are dealing with human attackers, human adversaries. So they make mistakes and they reveal some information about themselves, as you'll see today. So now, without further ado, let's leverage Unparalleled RDP capture depth. So quickly, RDP is the remote desktop protocol. It is a means to interact with a remote system with a graphical interface, as opposed to Telnet and SSH. On the left-hand side here, you have the MSTSC remote desktop connection client. And on the right-hand side is what you get once you use a traditional legitimate RDP access. Now, in order to do the capture, in order to study the adversaries, we are performing a monster-in-the-middle attack, leveraging PyRDP, an open source tool that we have in our Go Secure GitHub page that you can look at. And now, without further ado, what does it look like?
Yeah, we wanted to show you what it looks like really when an attacker is inside our system. So here you'll see a video appear in the screen, and you'll see that this is our tool to replay the session. So you'll see the screen of the attacker and then the mouse movement of the attacker with the little yellow dot there. It will move in a second. And at the bottom, you can see everything that goes through the clipboard and the keyboard of the attacker while they are connected to our computer. At the beginning of the session, we see the information with which they enters to. So it starts, here you see the last thing they got in the clipboard was our IP address. Now you see that they type on screen, but we also see what they are typing directly on our tool, in our tool. And this is very useful when they type something on the screen that we cannot see, because we can grab it, we can steal the clipboard. So here he's changing the password. We also see that they paste their C drive directly on our computer, which allow us to just grab everything that was in there. And in this case, the person just proceed with his or her activities in which they use a crypto miner. So it's basically surveillance cameras for Windows system. Olivier, I'll let you continue.
So how did we deploy this? So we deployed it on the cloud, and we carefully firewalled everything so that all RDP access had to be done via our system. So in a sense, there was no legitimate access to the computer besides our monitoring system. Now, if you want to learn more about PyRDP specifically, we've been talking and doing red and blue exercises with it for a long time. So here's a bunch of references that you'll have in the PDF of the presentation. Now, let's look at the data that we collected over the 3-year study. We had, as I mentioned previously, 190 million events. Through these events, we captured more than 20 million net and TLM v2 hashes. We saw 2,600 successful logins, almost 500 files were transferred, and we captured 2,400 sessions. On the screen, you can see the world map of the sessions that were captured. So these countries do not represent the raw brute force attempts to log in, but the people who interacted with the system the most. So successful attacks, if you want. And on the bottom of the slide, you can see the timeline. So you can see that we were not consistently receiving activity throughout the 3 years, but we had more activity recently with some spikes and downtimes straight out.
Yeah, and as Olivier mentioned, there was 2.3 thousand sessions collected. However, they are not all interesting. Some establish a connection and don't leverage it, or just some connect and disconnect. For the purpose of this study, we analyze only the session in which something happens, which is 339 sessions, and which represents around 100 hours of video footage. So yeah, let's dive into the profile that we saw through our analysis. We saw 5 different behavior profiles. So we will cover them quickly, each one of it. So the first one is the ranger. The ranger will explore all the folder of the computer. They will check the network and host performance characteristics. They will run reconnaissance by using scripts or by clicking their way through all the information of the system. There is, however, no other meaningful action that have been undertaken. So we hypothesize that they might be evaluating the system for others. Oh, sorry, I forgot this slide. So I'll show you a video of a ranger in action. Here, you'll see a video appear. So in this video, you'll see the person is connected to our system, paste 2 binaries on the desktop, and then run the first one. The binaries who just are aimed to grab all information or steal intelligence about our system, and then run the second one, copies the information, and leave. And before leaving the session, the person just erase all traces, erase the 2 binaries, and leave. The second character here, the second profile of behavior, is the thieves. Thieves will try to monetize their access by any means possible. So the tool they use are proxyware, monetizing browser. In other words, they participate in pay-to-serve scheme. They are also using crypto miners and Android emulator to perform fraud. So there's plenty of ways of monetizing their access. Here, a video of a thief in action. So in this video, the person is using Traf Monetizer. So they connect to their account by putting their personal information that we can see, but that we made sure to blur it here. So they are using Traf Monetizer, which is a residential proxy enabler. They use it to pass third-party traffic through our system and get paid for doing so. The third profile is, we called it the barbarians. Barbarians use a large array of tools to brute force their way into more computers, compromise their system by working with IP addresses, username, and password, and they use a couple of tools that we will see in the next video. An example of them. Here they are using Mascan. And you see that, so Mascan is to detect other RDP session. Well, not only RDP, but in this case, they are specifically targeting the RDP port, precising the port that they want, and then precising the country that they are targeting to. So here they're choosing Vietnam. And they perform the attack, and they try to brute force their way into more computers. The fourth profile of behavior will be the wizards. The wizard they will use the RDP access as a portal to connect to other computer and do other and then do other activities, right? So they are the one who will show the highest level of skills in our 5 profiles. And here is a video of a wizard in action. So they are connected through our RDP session, but then connect to another RDP session. And we will see that in in this session, they will perform other activities. And in this example, they are using NL Brute, which is another attack tool, and they will connect to a third RDP desktop to perform their activities on many desktop at the same time. Right? So they are using tools that are there already, which are very difficult to detect. And yes, so they are basically living off the land. This is what we call them. So they show a higher level of skills and a higher level of protection, right? They add a layer to that. And finally, the fifth profile is the Bard. And if you are a Dungeon and Dragon fan and you play the Bard, I am sorry for this analogy here, but individual in this category will have no apparent hacking skills. So they access the computer to accomplish very basic tasks like looking for viruses through simple Google search, or they watch porn. So evidence points toward the fact that they might have bought the RDP access from someone else, from someone who have compromised the system for them, maybe an initial access broker, or maybe like the ranger that we saw first in the first profile. So here is a Bard in action in the video that will show up. So the person is doing very basic Google search, typing the strongest virus ever in the search bar, and then reading about those viruses. Here we translated what is going on, but basically it's just information about viruses. Another search for a virus script, looking at some pages, but he abandons his research for virus script very quickly to go watch porn. And then we can see a couple of research for porn, porn.com, porn.org, sex.org. There's plenty of them. Many different research here. And we can see their level of knowledge of porn consumption when they are trying to watch porn through YouTube, which is pretty difficult. So of course we ask ourselves, why porn? Why people are they connecting to our computer or to the computer of someone else just to watch porn? And after a couple of verification, we noticed that the user seems to be coming from the Middle East, and more particularly from countries in which there is some sort of internet censorship, and therefore where pornography is banned. They are accessing our computer and to be able to consume pornography, and either to watch it or potentially to resell it too. And we also wanted to show you a couple of sessions that had some interesting observation. So here in the first video, the attacker might work in team, and we witnessed that in this session. So the person is downloading tools, and in the clipboard we see a message appear, a message that seems to be sent to someone else, saying, "Why did you delete all applications with a broken heart?" So this is evidence that more than one person have access to the compromised computer. The second video here will show that some attackers do not speak English. So here the person is trying to buy Google Ads with stolen credit card, and a pending approval message appears. And we can see that the attacker does not understand what it says, because he has to use Google Translate. He even chooses the right language, in this case Arabic, so you cannot beat this level of attribution, really. And speaking of language, we did a quick analysis of the identify language in the session or alphabet in the sessions, and we have what we have is half of them is of the alphabet that we see are Arabic, and then almost 30% Farsi or Persian, and then we have Cyrillic, Vietnamese, and Chinese. But we have to be careful here. It's hard to be sure of the alphabet in a session, and it's rare that we see it. So it represents only 13% of all the session that we analyzed. And finally, in the last video that we wanted to show you is how the tool is great for intelligence or to start an investigation for law enforcement, for example. So here the attacker is connecting to his or her Telegram account, putting the phone number. Of course, it could be a false number or a burning phone or something like that, but we made a verification, and the RDP session was really coming from Algeria. We can see the password, and then once we are in the account, we can also see all the chat room that they use, and where they can find illegal stuff and illegal tools and everything. So I'll let Olivier conclude with the takeaways.
Thank you, Andréanne. So yeah, it's time for the end of the quest and gather some experience points and look at the treasure. So in a nutshell, if anyone wants to reproduce similar research studying online adversaries, here's like how we structured our data analysis pipeline and also our honeypots themselves. So you can see that we have like PyRDP instances in front of the Windows machines that we exposed. We collect the evidence in the form of logs and binary blobs, so transferred files and replay files on object storage. The logs themselves are streamed to a message queue. We connect to that message queue using Fluentd, and then we publish that in the Elastic Stack, from which we use directly, or we query via Jupyter Notebooks, and then do more analysis in either RStudio or Excel, depending. The binary files are transferred using rclone to object storage in the cloud. This way, the whole honeypot infrastructure is decoupled from our corporate infrastructure, so we cannot be attributed back. We then analyze this using our PyRDP tool and another file analysis tool that, called FQ, for which we written the RDP parser. All of this is orchestrated via Docker, Terraform, and using CI/CD pipelines. What this allows us is that since we give full Windows machines to the adversaries, we need to react quickly if they do something wrong or attack other organizations. And so the CI/CD pipeline enables us to quickly destroy compromised environments in order to limit the damage that is done. So this whole thing is, as you can see, built on the open source technology, so quite easy to reproduce for yourself. The party. So now we've seen the Ranger, which is very populous and is clearly there to analyze, assess what they have access to. Our honeypots in this iteration of the research were quite simple. So Ranger would come in, evaluate, and then get out. Then we see the bards. Luckily, they were not that numerous, but it still highlights an interesting fact of life that some countries with limited access will create this type of opportunistic behavior where they will try to resell illicit content because there will be a market for it in their countries. The next one is the thief. Sorry. The thief is clearly, for me, from my experience, what cybercrime is all about. So it's opportunistically make money. They were not after necessarily someone specific. They just picked the low-hanging fruit, and then they run all the payload they can in order to maximize money output, which is crypto miner, and it could be eventually ransomware and stuff like that. but also monetizing proxy, monetizing browsers and stuff like that. Then we have the wizard, which characterized the living off the land, the strategy using the compromised system as a pivot to other systems. More sophisticated, the one that is difficult to tackle when we're looking at crime globally, law enforcement, we need access to other jurisdiction. These are the famous proxy layers that are hard to go after, but with a tool like PyRDP, it's made possible. And then the Barbarian, which is also one of the largest groups, which is leveraging RDP to compromise other RDP. Here we have an interesting, or we developed a thoughtful understanding of one aspect that is going on. So we were hosted on AWS. We were getting compromised by barbarians. For example, they would brute force, find the password, get in. Then they would install mass scan and scan other systems. What we realize here is that by being on AWS, they probably, because they could scan from their own system in the first place, right? Why compromise a computer to then scan? The reason is that probably we have some organization who will whitelist all of AWS's infrastructure because it's simpler to do that than to do manual least privilege firewall rules, right? And so they are less sophisticated IT, most likely, and then they whitelist all of AWS's IP ranges in order for business continuity to work. Well, these barbarians will take advantage of that. They are leveraging the AWS IP to scan and maybe find new RDP systems that are not visible otherwise. So an interesting thing that we found. Specific takeaways by attendees, for attendees, sorry, by category of attendees. Researchers, so we feel that RDP is a really great area of research because it is very close to the cyber criminal and it is very concrete. We see them act. They are. It is very visible. For Blue Team, we advise that to consume the IOC we released. So these IOCs are on our GitHub page. A lot of attack tools and some reconnaissance tools were part of that, some of which were not detected according to VirusTotal. I hope they would be by now, since this was done for our Black Hat USA research in August. We, by the way, provided the binaries, even though they were not on VirusTotal, to make sure that they would eventually be picked up by the AV industry and detected. For law enforcement, we advise we want them to be aware of the capabilities of RDP interception, and so that they can leverage it to go after ransomware groups. And let me just give you a quick example. If you witness a system that is used by ransomware groups, and ransomware groups do rely a lot on RDP for phishing and as part of their shared access model, if you know this box is used for ransomware phishing and or proxy of some sort, if you look only at the connection metadata, because everything is encrypted, you don't understand what's going on, who are the victims. All you have is the next hop. Potentially for phishing emails, we will have like Microsoft or Google, because these are large email providers. But if you are able to intercept lawfully the RDP of this environment, then you will see people logging in. You will see them configure their phishing mailing kit, and you will see who are the victims, not just where the emails are going, but actually the inboxes that are being targeted. So this will really open or make an investigation be more precise and faster. So we really want them to be aware of the capabilities of RDP interception in that context. All of this is done because we think that attackers should fear being so reckless with RDP. It is a very scanned and targeted protocol. We feel that if they fear getting caught on camera, it might change their behavior. They might be more careful. And we think, like on our honeypots, since the Black Hat presentation, we did notice some changes. They're not scientific yet. We're still crunching the numbers. but we do have a sense of something is different. And so we hope that doing research like this is going to change and protect everyone, not just our clients. And with that, I think we are finished.
Okay, well, very good presentation. Thank you very much, Olivier and Andréanne. And just let our audience know that we have a couple of questions from you. Please feel free to submit more. We'll take them after our next presentation. And I'd like to introduce John Cassell, Senior Solutions Architect with Syxsense. Over to you, John.
All right, thank you, Steve. And thank you to the Go Secure team for the research that you guys have been performing. Clearly took a lot to collect and analyze that information, and then obviously to classify that into attacker profiles, so well done. Again, my name is John Cassell, Senior Solutions Architect at Syxsense. I have been working in IT operations for 18 years. Cybersecurity a little bit newer for me for the past 5 or 6 years. I've been at Syxsense for almost a full decade at the end of this year. And at Syxsense, I focus on customer training, pre-sale support, and helping customers follow industry best practices within the Syxsense solution. Let's keep the theme going and jump into what Syxsense can do for you. Full disclosure, I'm not fully versed in Dungeons and Dragons. I'm more of a sci-fi guy. If we're talking Star Wars or better yet, Star Trek, I'm happy to go full sci-fi. But this is still exciting, and so let's have some fun while learning a little bit more and what we can do to minimize or eliminate RDP exploitation. So once upon a time, I'm going to go to the next slide. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom. This is obviously a castle. I don't want to give the perspective that all environments are, of course, a perimeter network. We're all moving towards a zero trust model, but let's just use this again as an analogy, the business itself. There was assessing the typical business environment. We have remote workers. We have mobile fleets, on-premise desktops, cloud-based workspaces, on-premise servers, and cloud-based services. So obviously a lot that can be considered vulnerable to any exploits. But of course, today we'll be focusing on one of the top known vulnerabilities very shortly. As the story goes, the kingdom was besieged by a gang of rogues, all wishing to exploit the fabled protocol of remote desktop, for if they succeeded, they could plunder the kingdom's treasured data vault, or worse still, let loose a Trojan dragon to destroy all that was precious to the citizens of the kingdom. So we have our wizard, our bard, barbarian, ranger, and thief profiles. We'll be introducing a new one very shortly. I'm actually pretty fearful of course, the thief, the wizard, the bard as well, given that can pretty much go any direction. If I were to probably put myself into this, I'd probably say I'm a mimic, since I'm trying to really get into the DMD theme, from what I understand from a few. But again, we'll stick with it. Until one day, a paladin was summoned by the kingdom's minister of defense, and this holy warrior was tasked with protecting the kingdom's treasure and its citizens, of course, wherever they were. They may not be within the kingdom. Again, remote workers we also want to harden. So we'll be looking at a few practices here. We're going to use the Windows example going forward. Of course, RDP can technically be leveraged on Unix-like, Mac OS. We'll be sticking with the Windows scenario. Protocol of remote desktop, there are different ways to, of course, protect against this. We don't want to be reactive in any case. So when we talk a little bit more about the Syxsense solution, we offer reactive protection. You want remote reactive monitoring and management, I like to call it. And then as well, proactive enforcement through automation. And that's what we'll be looking a little bit more at today, of course. Registry changes, local policy changes. We have, of course, the precedents. We're talking about group policy that can affect that as well. So we need to keep that in mind. Firewall enforcement, binaries, so on and so forth. Recommendations. As mentioned, I train customers on best practices, of course, what we can perform at the endpoint level, being an endpoint management solution. Identity protection is also very important, going hand in hand. Of course, the push over the last 10 years or so towards identity protection is very important. Least privilege principles always to be maintained, but then we'll also be looking at simply disabling and replacing RDP as a remote solution. Now, this does, of course, have a tendency to kind of line up with, of course, IT departments and whether they have enough skill to get into a scripted scenario, or unfortunately, they have to use UI. So If we have enough scripting knowledge, we could probably get a lot of our jobs done with server core. We don't have to use RDP, or we can, of course, just send scripts across directly. Still a lot to be exploited there, but of course, RDP wouldn't be as much of a concern. So protocol remote desktop is hereby banished, hopefully to be vanished. So Syxsense in action, what is it that we can perform? And this is, again, just one particular scenario out of thousands that we could discuss and what is preloaded with the Syxsense solution. I've included a few screenshots and some samples, of course, of what we can perform. Before we do that, though, a bit of a background on what Syxsense offers. It is an automated endpoint management solution. I've broken it down into three, but of course, there's a lot within these three different topics. An intuitive automation builder simplifies IT and security processes with I like to call it low code, because I do like to script, but keeping it much easier for those teams that aren't really familiar with, say, getting in depth with PowerShell. And it is a drag and drop interface we'll see in just a few moments. Enforcing compliance to security policies, of course, with zero trust as being the forefront of our minds by continuous asset by asset evaluation, and as well authentication of user and device remediation for any non-compliant assets. It's one or the other. It's either compliant or it's not. And in most cases, devices are not compliant. Let's always assume, of course, that they are not. Vulnerability scanning, remediation. Two different things, obviously. We focus on remediation. A lot of products will scan and make recommendations. We go the extra step to provide the pre-built remediations so that patches are a simple part of it. We'll talk about that too, but we want to focus on resolutions. Monitoring is also another aspect, which we'll get into when we go through the different steps of resolving the said scenario and ensuring that we have a proactive mindset, but then as well, if we do run into alerts, that of course those alerts get triggered and we can do something about it. Now, alerts, of course, probably a little bit more reactive if it's relying on us. I have a family, I go on vacation, things, of course, can then become an issue if I'm not around, and then it gets exploited in literally just 5 minutes. That's all it takes. So we want to, again, as well, put in a proactive policy so the system itself can redesign and reiterate and be persistent. That's one of the big terms today, to continuously adhere to standards. So keeping with the theme, an ancient technology known as the protocol of the remote desktop. First step is detection, illuminating those hidden threats. I have a little snippet here through the sacred light that guides his path, the paladin, his or her path. Paladin discerns the truth, illuminating the shadows before the final clash. Now, this is just one screenshot I just like to show. It's one of thousands of vulnerabilities that we can check for, but then providing as well the exposure details. One little piece there, of course, that can still introduce an issue. Devices are roaming. Maybe they're not checking in consistently. We don't reactively scan. You might see based on the numbers there on that little screenshot, one device has not been checked yet. That's actually one endpoint in my lab that I purposefully keep offline. And once a month, I switch it on and items get checked. So we want to make sure, of course, that the proactive scan policy is also in place. Ours are, again, policies, not tasks. We see from many patch and vulnerability solutions that you kind of got to wait for a certain schedule of the day. That's not very accurate, and it is not successful. So putting policies in place with, say, 5-second, 10-second, 1-minute timers as soon as that endpoint turns on, especially if it's remote, and then has to VPN back into our resources, we want to make sure that it is hardened. We want to then, of course, banish RDP. This is actually the easy part, I would say. It's not too hard to turn off the protocol, and it's not very difficult to make registry changes, but it's only a precursor into the next step, of course, to harden the asset, given that updates, especially on Windows, can sometimes make changes to the system. A new vulnerability can be disclosed. Hopefully RDP is not in use. Many are still using it out there, but there are as well other solutions which we'll get to. In this case, the Paladin introduced a powerful kind of magic known as orchestration. It allows spells to be automated and linked together to produce transformational effects on our endpoints. You might see on the right-hand side a collection of various operating system actions, which can then not completely replace scripts, but is much easier to read and fits into various departments within the organization so that, say, the non-IT folk can understand a little bit more about the policies that are taking place. It also allows tracking to be significantly easier. Following best practices, strengthening the barricades, fortifying the gates. I don't want to get entirely into this perimeter approach of saying that, of course, if devices are outside, they're untrusted. As soon as they're inside, everything's okay. Again, still keep a zero trust mindset. We're just sticking with the theme. With unwavering persistence, the Paladin has secured the castle. Its walls now fortified by the strength of unyielding determination. I got a few of these from a Dungeon Master who was kind enough to help me out with a little bit of it. In this particular example, we're performing prerequisites from the endpoint scenario, whether it be a host, a consumer device. I saw a few questions regarding BYOD. I'm happy to answer those a little bit further. Of course, for roaming endpoints, whether they be company-owned or not, we can still manage. But ensuring that whether it be a server with required prescripts, we're talking about a clustered environment, availability groups, we can, of course, include a lot more. This is a very basic example. Perform our prerequisites, action on something being out of sync, let's say, like it not having enough disk space, to perform the next phase. Scan and deploy all required updates. Updates for us don't come directly from, say, WSUS or coming directly from Windows updates. They are actually pre-curated and pre-vetted by our team so that the updates will have obvious discrepancies pre-vetted, but still supplied on release day. And a lot of updates are released, in fact, in the same minute that manufacturers release them too. The next step, which many skip when they think about remediation of a simple device, patching is what? What was it? 1 in 3 breaches are caused by unpatched vulnerabilities. I think a few out there might know that. What about the other 2/3? Misconfigurations, physical vulnerabilities. In this scenario, we're looking at operating system health. So applying all required policies and registry tweaks to eliminate those, as of course, you can patch something. We're talking about Windows Server. There are optional mitigations to then be ran after the fact. And that can introduce, of course, additional exploitations. So we want to make sure we handle those too. The last piece everyone worries about, the reboot, the downtime. What about my end users? I'm the bad guy here. You don't have to be. We can include somewhat of a middle ground so that we have control of said downtime, but as well still allowing users to not opt out, but rather defer. Monitoring that realm, persistent surveillance, swift response, assured of the Cassell's safety, the Paladin strides forth, his faith unwavering, ready to face whatever darkness may lie ahead. This is one of many different dashboard profiles we could set up so that we can actually see the difference in information, like which Windows assets are still affected by RDP vulnerabilities, which still have RDP enabled in general, and then as well any non-Windows assets in this case that we also want to assess, seeing that better attack surface. Lastly, beyond RDP, exploring alternative paths for a safe and secure environment. With the ancient relics banished by modern fortifications, the Paladin ensures the stronghold stands firm against the tides of time and tyranny. So we do offer remote support assistance options. A lot of our capabilities actually focus more on low code, so no need to actually have to control the screen per se, but better automation towards policies in the background, with the focus on non-invasive actions towards end users. We know RDP would clearly kick a profile out. It's not really a great option for some. So in this case, we want to offer other options like silent two-way file transfer, like PowerShell scripting in the background, but still giving those particular responses, what it is that we need to secure. And so the Paladin's legacy became legend: protect everything everywhere from the cloud, reduce cost by eliminating silos with a single unified endpoint management solution and automate those services, improve those services by detecting and fixing vulnerabilities faster by leveraging automation with our preloaded content and pulling as well content that might be more specific to a homegrown solution. That's fine too. We adapt to many different customer environments as we are across every industry. Those specifications can clearly change. And we talk to security teams, we know it's a matter of subjection. Reduce risk, make smarter decisions through compliance and benchmark reporting with remediation. Of course, following CIS benchmarks, level 1 and 2, DISA STIG, I could bring up a bunch of others, HIPAA compliance. We want to adhere to those based on the industry, so of course, let's go with best practices. That's what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions after this, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Steve.
Okay, nice job. Thank you very much, John. And we're going to segue into our Q&A session. We have a lot of questions, so I want to thank you for that. Feel free to submit more, and we'll take them. We've got some time. I want to remind you that we have a survey that we'd appreciate our audience filling out. And, of course, check out our resources and any other background material that we have posted here. So let me go and take a look while our presenters are also checking. Our first question I'd like to take, and it's from Pranay. iPassing and getting into RDP work? What technique would you follow here? So, would like to handle that one.
I will. Thank you. Okay, nice question, Pranay. I'm gonna just repeat it. So what can be done to deceive more RDP attackers, and do you believe this will be effective to fight cyber threats? So to deceive more RDP attackers, I believe that we need to present more convincing systems, and this is a classic feedback loop opportunity. Let me be really specific, and I've done this before with SSH and Telnet honeypots. But so we see the attackers, how they evaluate our system, how they fingerprint it, and then we just need to fake the next step better, fake it or make it real, depending. But so, for example, we see a lot of network capability evaluation, but also if the machine is joined to a domain, for example. So right now in our previous research, the answer was no. So we were not using domain joined computers for simplicity reason. As you saw, everything is automated and orchestrated. So it's more difficult to add a machine to a domain. We would need to involve another scripting language like PowerShell. But it can be done and will be done, obviously. But so we will then, present the attackers with a system that is domain joined and see how different is the behavior. We can apply this approach to all of the indicators that we have collected so far. So, for example, we saw a lot of password attempts that were tailored to the environment that they are attacking. So far, and I think this is going to answer another question, but so far, to get into our honeypots, you had to guess the administrator password, and we put on purpose something really simple like admin. Now, we saw all of the password attempts that were done, and we saw that some will tailor the password attempt based on the information really revealed by the RDP metadata. So now we are right now having honeypots that leverages this, and we expect to gather intelligence about different types of attacker than the ones trying admin. So if you apply this kind of feedback loop approach to all adversaries, or at least all rangers, then we will be able to deceive more of them into different directions and collect more knowledge about that. And I think that the fighting cyber threat angle will work more via education, but also detection. So we do collect fingerprinting tool, monitoring tool that they use, and a lot of them are not widely distributed or widely known, and they are not malware in themselves. So by submitting them to VirusTotal, that by making them labeled as malware, now they are going to be detected and deleted, and those breaches, so these which could have been labeled as potentially unwanted applications, now we know they are used by people with malicious intent. So this kind of raises the criticality of such tools, whereas before they were not detected. So we hope that this will have an impact fighting or preventing more cyber threats. I hope I answered the question.
Oh, very well. Thank you very much, Olivier. I have another question here. How do you prevent productivity issues for end users when reboots are required? Who'd like to take that?
I think that's a question for me for the Syxsense solution. As mentioned in that particular example, we do offer customized downtime options for when it comes to reboots, such as notifications that become interactive to end users. We can certainly deliver that to any endpoint type. That's not an issue. I usually recommend, say, if it's for a patch scenario, which is, of course, why most reboots are necessary, we detether the approach. So we patch consistently, at least at what the team can handle in terms of change control, and perpetually, but then as well, plan for those times of downtime. Usually we hear about a lot of companies going with end of the weekend or outside business hours. Just not in the middle of the workday. Let's agree with that one. But if we do have 0 days or on-demand, out-of-band updates that might be required, we might have to actually rush that out. So it's a little bit subjective based on why the reboot might actually be required. Downtime is one of the biggest concerns and headaches we hear of, but we do offer options that do allow the administrator to set the policy, but then keeping the end users, of course, productivity still in mind. So it is flexible.
Great. How about a follow-up here? Do you include third-party application updates as well as OS updates?
Yeah, we do, actually. So the operating system updates do come directly from manufacturers, and as mentioned, we do pre-vet a lot of those as we receive many operating system updates in advance. Can't disclose that information, but being protection partners with Microsoft and a few others, we can test, but then still drop as soon as the rest of the industry receives it. Third-party applications, those can come out at any time, we know. I do a webcast monthly talking about the latest third parties, and usually what we hear about those is, of course, 0 days, like Chrome, of course, one of the biggest ones. So it is a higher priority for us when it comes to, say, firmware updates and others. So third-party applications, we have a few hundred of them in the console, and they are not repackaged in any way, still genuine, but they are curated, of course, for the focus on security, and then CVE information always supplied. Hope that answered it. Happy to get into more depth if anyone wants to hit me up directly.
Great, thank you. Kim has a question here. Our company uses RDP a lot. What could be the best way to make it a lot more secure because our RDP gateways are always attacked? We'd like to tackle that.
I will take it. So Kim, we did. You need to understand, like, are you using Kerberos or NTLM as the mean of attack? Not attack, sorry about that. I was thinking ahead. As the mean of connection. So for authentication on your RDP gateway, under the hood, it's probably NLA enabled, but under the hood, is it Kerberos or NTLM? If it's NTLM, this is a problem, but it's not the servers that are problematic. It's the client that could be attacked. We have a blog post on the GoSecure blog that covers this specifically. This was a flaw that was reported to Microsoft years ago, and they said they're not gonna do anything about it. The risk would be that anyone connecting to your RDP gateway could have their oh, you know what? No, I got ahead of myself. RDP gateway is wrapped into HTTP using, I think, RPC, so it might not be vulnerable. So I was thinking traditional RDP, not RDP gateways. This is an area of exploration that we still need to investigate. So if you want to refer to the blog post, keep this in mind, that gateways are not necessarily vulnerable, but you should have a read. Now, what we advise our organization is not to use RDP straight on the internet. You should always use a layer of VPN to protect it. I'm not sure if you're saying your gateways are under attack. It could mean that they are directly exposed on the internet, which could be a risk that needs to be evaluated. But in a nutshell, RDP gateways are less at risk than traditional RDP, but the authentication protocol relying on NTLM is aging. Microsoft is trying to phase it out, and it could be potentially problematic, but there is no threat right now that, as far as I know.
Okay, thank you here. Dennis wants to know, whose vulnerability scanners do you use? I think this is for John.
That's a great question. We don't leverage another manufacturer's scanner. We built it in-house. In fact, we built our scanner about 12 years ago, early on in the industry. It was predominantly angled at policy and patch detection. And really all it took was just the introduction of new content, which we've gathered now over the years from various sources, just like many other manufacturers too. but it is not a microwaved or OEM scanner from someone else. It is built in-house and it's extremely efficient.
Okay, time for a couple more maybe. Let's see, Elton wants to know, are there D&D parallels for security versus IT operations staff? E.g., are different teams like certain characters? What are your thoughts?
I'm pretty sure we could find some, but I personally cannot answer this question just because I didn't make any analysis on the team's reaction and team's behavior. I'm only studying attackers for now. So.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, back to John here. Is Syxsense leveraging WSUS? What are the advantages there, if so?
Great question. I get this one often. We don't leverage WSUS. We don't leverage automatic updates. Our updates are actually gathered by manufacturers directly. We do supply round robin links, so if you want to get it from the manufacturer, you can, but they're still genuine. We just build the detection criteria in-house. So we can be technically complementary or a substitute, but we don't follow the classifications of course, what a SUS server would say. Or especially the advantage is we are not limited to on-premise. We include third-party updates. We include tracking. We include reporting. You get what you pay for with WSUS. It's free, so you don't get much. Let's be honest. It's a great structured approach, but ours simplifies it. And as well, another term out there, you can call it backporting. You can call it supersedence. The chain of the vulnerability is tough to track with systems like that. So we color code and, in fact, provide the vulnerability chain. So it's easy to see what is the latest update that would solve that vulnerability, even though we haven't patched for a whole year. You don't really get that out of products like SUS.
Okay, and let's see. I think we can wrap it up here with one question from Lauren. Can I use Syxsense in conjunction with other scanning tools?
Yeah, as just mentioned with WSUS, we can still be a complementary solution. We don't have compatibility issues with other products out there. When it comes to scanning, that's not an issue at all. It might just be some additional processes. Deployments, if we're talking about like the common denominator here, Windows systems, you can only action one particular, I guess, channel when you're performing patching. You can only run MSI exec a couple times. So those might be some functional limitations of execution. But in terms of scanning, we're happy to diversify that. We understand that it's a recommendation by many out there to have more than one. And we're fully open to it and as well to integrate.
Okay, thanks very much. Unfortunately, that's going to be all the time we have for this session. And we want to thank everybody for attending today's Black Hat webinar. I watched you roll the die. Unparalleled RDP monitoring reveal attackers' trademark solutions, sponsored by Syxsense and brought to you by Black Hat and Informa. Shortly after this live event, we'll send you an email so you can access this presentation on demand. And on behalf of our guests, Olivier Bilodeau, Cybersecurity Research Director, and Andréanne Bergeron, Cybersecurity Researcher, also with Go Secure, and our sponsor presenter, John Cassell, Senior Solutions Architect with Syxsense. We want to thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.